as it always does. Unannounced. The night. Not just a time of day but a state. Like someone who walks into your room without knocking. And you don't have time to hide your thoughts. Don't have time to put on calm. It's already here. I lay there, staring at the ceiling. Feeling the darkness not just around me but inside me. Not frightening. Not aggressive. Just dense. Like a blanket you didn't choose but have to accept. The night doesn't ask if you're ready to remember. Simply opens the door. And out come the images. Her voice. Her silence. Her I don't know. And my please. Everything that was returns. Not as pain. As presence. I don't fight it. I let it be. Because night isn't the enemy. It's a mirror. And when you stare into it long enough, you see yourself. Not the daytime version. The real one. Without roles. Without armor. I remember how she was silent. How her eyes spoke louder than words. And how I didn't know how to listen. Because in daylight we're all loud. But night is a space for silence. And that's why it's so honest. This night didn't bring answers. Didn't offer relief. But it left something more important. Permission to be tired, alive. And I accepted it. Without resistance. Because the night doesn't ask permission. And I no longer forbid myself to feel. She didn't say goodbye. Not with words. Not even with silence. She just shifted. Like a shadow that moves before the body does. And I felt it before I understood it. There's a moment when someone is still beside you. But already gone. Not physically. Emotionally. Like a room that still holds warmth. But the fire's been out for hours. I kept talking to her. To the version of her that had already left. Trying to reach a place she no longer lived in. And every "I'm fine," she whispered, wasn't a bridge. It was a wall. I used to think love was about holding on. Now I know. Sometimes it's about noticing when someone's already let go. Not out of cruelty. But out of quiet exhaustion. Out of the weight of things unsaid. She didn't slam the door. She didn't vanish. She just became distant in ways that words couldn't trace. And I kept chasing echoes. Thinking they were still her voice. The hardest part wasn't the leaving. It was the staying. When presence had turned into absence. When her laughter felt rehearsed. When her eyes stopped asking to be understood. I remember the last time she looked at me. And didn't see me. Not because she didn't want to. But because she couldn't. Her shadow had already walked away. And I was still holding her hand. It wasn't the silence that hurt. It was the way we filled it. With half smiles. With "I'm okay"s that neither of us believed. With the kind of quiet that feels like holding your breath. For too long. We used to talk about everything. Now we talked around things. Like dancers avoiding the center of the floor. Afraid to step where the truth lived. The room hadn't changed. Same walls. Same light. But something in the air was different. Thicker. Like the space between us had learned how to resist closeness. I watched her fold a blanket. Slowly, carefully. As if the act could delay the moment. We'd have to say something real. And I wanted to scream. But my voice had forgotten how to ask for help. We were both tired. Not from each other. But from pretending. Pretending that love was still enough. Pretending that silence was peace. When it was really surrender. There's a kind of intimacy that dies quietly. Not with fights. Not with betrayal. But with the slow erosion of breath shared. Of glances that used to linger. Of words that used to matter. I remember touching her hand. And feeling nothing change. Not because I didn't care. But because the room had already decided. We were no longer in it together. We forgot to breathe. And in that forgetting. We lost the part of us that knew how to stay. I stood in front of it. Not for vanity. Not for habit. But because I needed to see something real. And mirrors, they don't lie. They don't soften. They don't protect. It showed me the version of myself I'd been avoiding. The tired eyes. The forced calm. The weight of words I never said. Because I didn't want to break her. But I was already breaking. There's a kind of truth that only silence reveals. And mirrors, they speak in silence. They don't ask questions. They just reflect them back. I saw the way I'd shrunk. Not physically. Emotionally. How I'd made myself smaller. To fit into a love that no longer had room for me. I remembered the way she used to look at me. Like I was a story worth reading. And how, slowly, I became a footnote. The mirror didn't show blame. Showed choices. The ones I made to stay. The ones she made to drift. And the ones we both made. To pretend it was still working. I touched the glass. Half hoping it would crack. Not out of anger. But to prove that something could still break honestly. But it held. Like truth always does. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't hurting. But because the mirror didn't need tears. It needed recognition. So I nodded. To myself. To the version of me that had been waiting. To be seen. And for the first time in weeks. I said something out loud. I miss who I was with her. But I miss who I was before her even more. It didn't happen in a single moment. No slam doors. No final words. Just a slow fading. Like fog lifting from a field. Leaving behind only the outline of what used to be. We never said goodbye. Not properly. Not clearly. We just stopped reaching. Stopped asking. Stopped being the version of ourselves that knew how to hold on. I remember the last time we sat together. 2 cups of tea. 2 people pretending warmth. Her fingers wrapped around the mug. Mine wrapped around a memory. There was no fight. No confession. Just a quiet agreement between our silences. This was the end. Even if we didn't name it. I kept waiting for her to say something. Anything. A thank you. A sorry. Even a I don't know how to do this. But she just smiled. The kind of smile that's meant to soften a goodbye. Without admitting it's one. And I understood. Some goodbyes aren't spoken. Because they're too heavy for words. They live in gestures. In pauses. In the way someone looks at you. Like they're already remembering you. I walked her to the door. Not because she asked. But because I needed to. And when she turned to leave. I didn't say, take care. I didn't say, I'll miss you. I just nodded. As if to say, I know. She didn't look back. And I didn't ask her to. 'Cause some goodbyes are meant to echo in silence. And I've learned to listen. To what was never said. After she left. I didn't rearrange the room. Didn't change the sheets. Didn't move the cup she used. I let everything stay. As if silence needed a place to sit. It didn't feel empty. Not at first. Felt paused. Like the world was holding its breath. Waiting for something that wouldn't return. I used to fear silence. Now I live with it. It's not cruel. Doesn't shout. Just exist. Like a shadow that no longer needs light to be seen. I started noticing things. The way the floor creaks differently without her steps. The way the air feels heavier at night. The way my thoughts speak louder. When there's no one to interrupt them. Silence became my mirror. My journal. My companion. It didn't judge. Didn't fix. Just stayed. I talked to it sometimes. Not out loud. But in the way you speak to memories. Softly. As if they might break. I asked it questions she never answered. I told it things I never told her. And it listened. Not because it understood. But because it didn't need to. There's a kind of healing that happens. Not through noise. But through stillness. And in that stillness. I found pieces of myself. I'd forgotten to carry. Left. But the silence stayed. And somehow. That felt more honest. Than any goodbye. Didn't come all at once. Not like a wave. More like a whisper. Soft, persistent. The kind that finds you. Even when you're not listening. Her memory didn't knock. Just entered. Sat beside me. Uninvited. But not unwelcome. I tried to forget. Not out of anger. But out of mercy. For myself. For the version of me. That still reached for her in dreams. But memory has its own rules. It doesn't care about time. Or healing. Or logic. It lives in scent, in sound, in the way a stranger's laugh can break you open. I saw her once. Not really her, but someone who moved like she did. And for a moment, my heart forgot what my mind had learned. I remembered the way she used to say my name. Not just the sound, but the intention. Like it mattered. Like I mattered. And I hated how much I missed that. I tried to rewrite the story. To make her colder. To make myself braver. But the memory refused. It held the truth. Not the version I wanted, but the one that lived in the quiet corners of my chest. She was kind. She was distant. She was mine. She was never mine. And that contradiction is what stayed. I don't chase the memory anymore. But I don't run from it either. I let it sit. Let it speak. Let it remind me that love doesn't always leave scars. Sometimes it leaves echoes. And echoes, no matter how faint, still know your name. It didn't sound like much at first. Just a whisper. Thought barely formed. A sentence I didn't finish. But it was mine. For so long my voice had been shaped by her presence. By what I didn't want to say. By what I hoped she'd understand without asking. I spoke in fragments. In softened truths. In the language of not wanting to lose her. But she was already gone. And silence had stayed long enough to teach me how to listen. Not to her, but to myself. I started speaking again. Not loudly, not perfectly, but honestly. I said things I used to swallow. I'm tired. I'm not okay. I miss who I was before I tried to be enough. And the world didn't fall apart. It didn't punish me. It listened. I wrote. Sang. I whispered to the walls. And slowly, my voice stopped sounding like apology, and started sounding like truth. I didn't need her to hear it. I needed me to hear it. There's a kind of freedom in reclaiming your own sound, in realizing that your voice isn't just for someone else's comfort. It's for your own becoming. I still think of her. Still wonder what she'd say. She heard me now. But I don't shape my words for her anymore. I shape them for the boy who stayed quiet too long. For the man who's learning to speak. Without fear. This voice. It's not perfect. Trembles. Breaks. But it's mine. And that is enough. It didn't burst in. Didn't blaze. Didn't announce itself with fanfare. Simply appeared. Like morning slipping through a half-open curtain. Unassuming. Real. I didn't go looking for it. I wasn't ready. Wasn't searching. I was still sitting with my silence. Still tracing the edges of old wounds. Like they were maps to places I'd never return to. But light doesn't wait for readiness. It arrives when it's needed. Not when it's expected. Showed up in small ways. In the way the air felt less heavy. In the way music started sounding like possibility again. In the way I laughed. Not because I was healed, but because I remembered how. I didn't trust it at first. Thought it was a trick. Temporary warmth. Before the cold returned. But it stayed. Not to fix me. Just to remind me. That broken doesn't mean buried. I walked outside one evening. No destination. Just movement. And the sky. Didn't ask me to be okay. Just offered color. And I accepted. There's a kind of light that doesn't demand to be seen. Simply exists. In kindness. In quiet. In the way you begin to forgive yourself. Without even realizing it. I didn't find the light. Found me. In the middle of my not knowing. In the heart of my stillness. And I didn't ask it to stay. But it did. Not as a promise. But as a presence. I used to think healing meant forgetting. That to move forward. I had to erase her name from every sentence. Every song. Every corner of myself where she once lived. But beginnings don't start with forgetting. They start with remembering differently. I woke up one morning. And didn't reach for my phone to check if she'd written. Didn't replay old messages. Didn't rehearse conversations that never happened. Just breathed. And in that breath, there was space. Not for her. For me. I made coffee. Not the way she liked it. the way I do. Played music. Not the songs that reminded me of her. The ones that reminded me of me. It wasn't dramatic. Wasn't cinematic. Just quiet. Just mine. I walked past the places we used to go. And didn't flinch. Didn't ache. I noticed the trees. The sky. The way the world kept offering beauty. Even when I wasn't asking for it. This beginning didn't need her. Not because she didn't matter. But because I do. I used to build my days around her absence. Now I build them around my presence. I write again. Not to reach her. To reach myself. I laugh again. Not to prove I'm okay. But because I am. This beginning isn't loud. Doesn't need to be. It's steady. It's honest. It's mine. And for the first time. That feels like enough. It started like any other. No revelations. No signs. Just a morning. But something was different. I didn't check my messages. Didn't wonder if she'd remember. Didn't rehearse what I'd say. If she suddenly came back. I just lived. I made breakfast. Not for two. Just for me. I didn't set aside her favorite mug. Didn't leave space at the table. I filled the silence with music. Not memories. There was a time I measured my days. By her absence. By how long it had been. Since she called. Since she cared. Since she stayed. But this day. I didn't wait. Not because I stopped loving. But because I started living. I walked without checking my phone. Laughed without wondering if she'd hear. I let the sun touch my face. Without asking if she'd join me. It wasn't defiance. It was release. I used to believe love meant waiting. That devotion was measured. By how long you could hold space. For someone who no longer stood in it. But love. Oh, love. Starts with presence. And today. I was present. I didn't wait for her. And the world didn't collapse. It expanded. I saw colors I hadn't noticed. Heard birds I'd tuned out. Felt the rhythm of my own breath. Without needing it to match hers. This day didn't ask for her. And I didn't offer it. Not out of bitterness. Out of peace. 'Cause sometimes. The most loving thing you can do. Is stop waiting. And start walking. Used to echo. Her absence. Her voice. Her laughter that lived in the corners of my mind. Long after she stopped sharing it. Silence was once a punishment. A reminder of what I'd lost. Of what I couldn't fix. Of the spaces she used to fill. And the questions she never answered. But something shifted. I stopped listening for her. Stopped waiting for the sound of her return. And in that stillness. I found something unexpected. Is not the kind that arrives with closure. The kind that grows slowly. Like moss on stone. Unrushed. Real. I sat in my room. No music. No distractions. Just breath. Just presence. And the silence didn't ache. Held me. I realized I'd spent so long. Trying to escape it. Filling it with noise. With memories. With imagined conversations. That always ended the same way. With her not choosing me. But now. The silence was mine. It didn't belong to her absence anymore. It belonged to my becoming. I wrote in it. Slept in it. Healed in it. And it never asked me to be anything. But honest. There's a kind of quiet. That doesn't demand. It invites. And I accepted. I no longer fear the silence. I welcome it. Because in its arms. I stopped being someone waiting to be loved. And started being someone. Who already is. I used to wait for her to say it first. To name it. To confirm it. To make it safe. I measured love by how much she gave. How often she stayed. How deeply she saw me. And when she didn't, I questioned if it was real. But love isn't a receipt. It's not proof. It's not something you earn. By being soft enough. Quiet enough. Easy enough. Something you feel. And I did. Even when she didn't. Even when she couldn't. I loved her. Not perfectly. Not endlessly. But truthfully. And for a long time. I thought that meant I needed her to love me back. For it to matter. But now I know. Love doesn't need permission. It doesn't need reciprocation to be valid, just needs honesty. I loved her in the way I remembered her laugh, in the way I forgave her silence, in the way I stayed, even when I knew she was already leaving. And that love, it wasn't wasted. Shaped me, softened me, taught me how to feel, without fear. I don't regret it. Not the giving, not the aching, not the hoping. Because love, when it's real, isn't about being chosen. It's about choosing. And I chose her. Fully, freely. Even when it hurt. Choose myself. With the same tenderness. With the same depth. With the same truth. This love, the one I carry now, doesn't ask for permission. Simply is. There was a time I hoped she'd think of me. Not constantly. Just enough. Enough to feel like I mattered. Even in her absence. I imagined her hearing a song. And pausing. Walking past a place. And remembering. Reading something. And seeing my name between the lines. And I clung to that. To the idea that memory was proof. That I'd left something behind in her. But today, I didn't need it. Not because I stopped caring. But because I started living. Without needing to be a chapter. In someone else's story. I walked through the day. Without wondering if she missed me. Without hoping she'd reach out. Without checking the spaces. Where her presence used to echo. And the silence. Didn't feel like loss. Felt like freedom. I used to believe. That being remembered. Was the only way to stay real. But I've learned. That I exist. Even when no one's looking. Matter. Even when no one says my name. Smile today. Not for her. Not for anyone. Just for the moment. Just for myself. And in that smile. There was no longing. No ache. Just peace. She may remember me. She may not. But I no longer build my worth on the architecture of her memory. I am not a ghost. Waiting to be summoned. I am a life. Being lived. And that is enough. I used to rehearse it. The truth. The version of it I thought she deserved. The one that explained everything. Why I stayed. Why I broke. Why I loved her even when it hurt. I imagined telling her. Not to win her back. Just to be understood. Be seen. In the full light of what I carried. But the truth doesn't always need an audience. Sometimes. Just needs a place to rest. I whispered it to the walls. To the night. To the pages I never sent. And it felt enough. She didn't ask. And I stopped needing her to. Because the truth I held. Wasn't about her anymore. It was about me. About the way I gave. Without keeping score. About the way I stayed. Even when I knew I was alone. I used to think. That sharing it would set me free. But freedom came. When I stopped needing it to be heard. I know what happened. I know what I felt. I know what I lost. And what I found. And that knowing. Quiet. Unsure. Unvalidated. Is mine. There's a kind of strength. In keeping truth close. Not as a secret. But as a sanctuary. She may never know. May never ask. May never care. But I do. And that is enough. I used to measure myself. By how she saw me. By the way her gaze softened. When I made her laugh. By the way it dimmed. When I disappointed her. Her eyes were my mirror. And when they stopped reflecting love. I questioned if I was still worth seeing. I tried to become what she needed. Quieter. Kinder. Less complicated. I edited myself. Like a draft she never asked for. But no matter how I rewrote. She stopped reading. And I forgot. That I was never meant to be a story. Written for someone else's approval. Today. I looked at myself. Not through her eyes. Through mine. And I saw someone. Who stayed. Who tried. Who broke. Without becoming bitter. I saw someone. Who loved deeply. Even when it wasn't returned. Who forgave. Without being asked. Who kept showing up. Even when the room was empty. I didn't need her eyes. To validate that. I didn't need her gaze. To feel real. I am not a reflection. I am a presence. And the version of me. That no longer waits to be seen. is the most honest one I've ever known. I still remember her eyes, still remember how they once held me. But I no longer chase their light, because I've found my own. I used to give it away. In handfuls. In silence. In the way I stayed up late. Just to make sure she felt heard. Even when I didn't. I offered it like breath. Natural, constant. Never asking for it back. But I forgot to give it to myself. I forgave her distance. But punished my longing. I understood her silence. But criticized my ache. I held space for her healing. But rushed my own. And somewhere in that imbalance, I began to disappear. Until one morning, I looked at myself. Really looked. Not with judgment. Not with shame. Just with softness. I saw the tired eyes. Quiet strength. The heart that kept showing up. Even when it wasn't invited. And I whispered something I'd never said out loud. You deserve kindness too. So I gave it. I let myself rest. Without guilt. Let myself feel. Without apology. Let myself remember. Without rewriting the past. I stopped calling myself too much. Stopped shrinking to fit. Stopped waiting for someone else to make me feel worthy. Kindness became a practice. Ritual. A way of returning to myself. Without needing permission. Made tea. Just for me. Wrote words. Just for me. Chose peace. Just for me. And in that choosing, I found something sacred. A love that didn't need to be earned. The kindness I finally gave myself wasn't loud. Wasn't dramatic. It was steady. It was healing. It was mine. There was a time I couldn't stand the emptiness. Quiet chair. The untouched pillow. The pause in conversation. Where her voice used to live. I tried to fill it. With noise. With movement. With people who weren't her. With words that didn't mean enough. Because silence felt like failure. Like proof. That I wasn't enough to keep her. But space isn't a punishment. It's a canvas. And slowly, I stopped trying to cover it. I let the room breathe. Let the quiet stretch. Let the absence be. Without turning it into a wound. I walked past the places we used to go. And didn't rush to replace the memory. I let it stand. Let it echo. Let it soften. There's a kind of healing that happens when you stop filling. When you stop proving. When you stop performing wholeness. And start living truth. I sat in the space she left behind. And didn't ache. I listened to the silence. And didn't flinch. I felt the emptiness. And didn't call it loneliness. Because it wasn't. It was mine. The space I no longer needed to fill. Became a place I could rest. Place I could grow. A place I could finally hear myself. She's gone. And that space. It doesn't ask for her anymore. It asks for nothing. And gives everything. I used to hope someone would find me. Not in the physical sense. But in the emotional one. That someone would notice the quiet ache. The unspoken questions. The way I kept showing up. While slowly fading inside. I wanted to be discovered. To be understood. Without explanation. To be chosen. Without asking. And for a while. Thought she had. Her gaze felt like recognition. Her presence felt like arrival. But even then, I was still searching. Because no one can find you if you haven't found yourself. I wandered through days. Waiting for signs. For messages. For moments that would tell me. Mattered. But today, I didn't wait. I didn't check my phone. Hoping for her name. Didn't look for meaning. In someone else's silence. Walk. Not toward anything. Just forward. And in that movement, felt something shift. I wasn't lost. I was exploring. I wasn't waiting. I was living. I didn't need to be found. 'Cause I was no longer hiding. There's a kind of peace that comes when you stop needing rescue. When you stop needing someone else to name your worth. I sat by the window, watched the light change, and whispered to myself, "You're here." And that's enough. No one came. No one had to. Because the day I didn't need to be found. was the day I realized I'd already arrived. I used to imagine them. The words. The ones I thought would fix it. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I still think of you. I played them in my head, like a song stuck on repeat. Not because they were true, but because I needed them to be. I wanted closure, wanted clarity, wanted her voice to stitch the torn places she left behind. But she never said them. And I stopped needing her to. Because healing doesn't wait for permission. It doesn't depend on someone else's vocabulary. Begins when you stop needing someone else to name your pain. I whispered my own words. To the night. To the mirror. To the version of me that stayed quiet for too long. I forgive you. I release this. I am still whole. And those words, they mattered more. She may never say what I hoped for. May never explain. May never return. But I no longer build my peace on the foundation of her voice. Build it. Mine. There's a kind of freedom in letting go of the script. In no longer waiting for the perfect sentence to make it all make sense. Some stories end without punctuation. Some wounds close without apology. And some truths don't need to be spoken to be real. The words I didn't hear no longer echo because the silence I now carry is mine, and it speaks with more honesty than she ever did. It didn't come with closure, didn't arrive after a final message. Clean goodbye, a moment that made it all make sense, came slowly, like dusk, unassuming, real. I used to think peace needed her forgiveness, her understanding, her return. I thought healing was a shared act, that I couldn't feel whole until she acknowledged the break. But peace doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait for someone else to hand it to you. It grows in silence, in the spaces she left, in the breaths I learned to take. Without her, I stopped chasing it, stopped bargaining for it, stopped believing it lived in her hands. And when I did, came not as a grand gesture, not as a revelation, but as a quiet knowing. I'm okay. I walked through the day without her shadow, sat in the evening without her memory pressing against my chest, and I felt light, not because I forgot, but because I forgave. I forgave the way she left, the way I stayed, the way we both tried, and still couldn't hold on. Peace didn't ask for her, it asked for me, to show up, to breathe, to let go. And I did. Not perfectly, not all at once, but enough. Enough to feel the stillness, and not mistake it for emptiness. Enough to feel the quiet, and not call it loneliness. Enough to feel myself, and not wish I were someone else. This peace is mine, and it doesn't need her to be real. I used to count it, the ways I gave, the ways she didn't, the imbalance between my heart and her silence. I thought love was a transaction, give and receive, offer and echo, but mine never came back the way I hoped, and for a while, that felt like failure. I questioned my worth through the lens of her absence, measured my tenderness against her distance, tried to shrink my longing so it wouldn't feel so loud. But love, oh love, doesn't need to be returned to be true. It lives in the giving, in the way I stayed, in the way I listened, in the way I held space, even when she didn't step into it. I loved her, fully, quietly, without condition. And that love, it didn't disappear, just because she did, became mine, not as regret, not as ache, but as proof that I can feel deeply, without losing myself. I no longer wait for her to match it, no longer hope she'll reflect it, no longer need her to validate it, because the love I gave was never wasted. Softened me, shaped me, taught me how to stay open, even when the world asked me to close. She may never return it, may never notice it, may never carry it, but I do, and that is enough. I used to revisit it, the moment she left, the words we didn't say, the ones we did, the silence that followed. I'd rewrite it in my mind, make it softer, make it clearer, make it kinder. I imagined saying the perfect thing, something that would make her stay, or at least make her understand. But no matter how many versions I created, the ending stayed the same. Left. And I remained. For a long time, I thought closure meant rewriting. That if I could reshape the goodbye, I could reshape the grief. But grief doesn't need edits. It needs honesty. And the truth is, we ended. Not with cruelty. Not with clarity. Just with distance. I didn't get the goodbye I wanted. But I got the one that happened. And that is enough. I stopped trying to make it poetic. Stopped trying to make it fair. Stopped trying to make it make sense. 'Cause sometimes, goodbyes aren't meant to be beautiful. They're meant to be real. I remember her last look. The way her eyes didn't linger. The way her voice didn't tremble. And I accept it now. Without needing it to be more. I don't rewrite it anymore. I let it stand. As it was. As it is. Because the goodbye I didn't need to rewrite became the beginning I didn't know I was ready for. It used to echo her. Every quiet moment. Every pause in conversation. Every night that fell too softly. Her name lived in the silence. Like a shadow I couldn't shake. Not spoken, but felt. In the way my chest tightened. When the world grew still. I filled the quiet with her memory. With imagined replies. With the sound of her laugh. That lingered longer than she did. But silence isn't meant to be haunted. It's meant to be held. And slowly, I stopped giving it her name. I let it be mine. Let it stretch without ache. Let it breathe without longing. I sat in it. Not as a mourner. As a witness. To my own healing. To my own voice. To the parts of me that only speak when the world goes quiet. Her name still exists. Still lives in the corners of my memory. But it no longer owns the silence. I write in it. Rest in it. Grow in it. And it no longer asks for her. It asks for presence. For truth. For peace. There's a kind of silence that doesn't echo loss. Echoes self. And that's the one I carry now. The silence that didn't need her name. Became the space where I finally heard my own. I used to fight it. The memory. Push it away. Mute it. Rewrite it. Because remembering her felt like losing her. All over again. I thought healing meant forgetting. That to move forward, I had to delete every trace. Every laugh. Every glance. Every moment that once felt like home. But memory isn't the enemy. It's the evidence. That I lived. That I loved. That I felt something real. I stopped trying to erase her. Stopped trying to scrub the past clean. And instead, I let it be. I let the memory sit beside me. Without asking it to leave. Let it speak. Without needing it to explain. Let it soften. Without needing it to disappear. She was part of my story. Not the whole. Not the ending. But a chapter that mattered. And I honor that now. Without needing to rewrite it. I remember her smile. And don't ache. Remember her silence. And don't flinch. Remember her leaving. And don't collapse. Because the memory no longer holds power over me. Holds perspective. It reminds me of who I was. Of what I gave. Of how deeply I can feel. And still survive. I don't need to forget her. Be free. I just need to remember. Without needing her back. The memory that didn't need to be erased. Became the place where I finally forgave myself. I used to speak, hoping someone would listen. Shape my words. To be palatable. Understandable. If I wanted to be heard. Wanted my pain to echo. In someone else's chest. Wanted my truth. To feel like enough. In someone else's silence. But the more I tried to be understood, the less I understood myself. I edited my voice. Until it sounded like longing. Until it stopped sounding like me. And then one day, I spoke. Without waiting for a reply. I wrote a sentence. That didn't ask for validation. Sang a note. That didn't need applause. whispered a truth that didn't need to be shared, and it felt whole. There's a kind of voice that doesn't perform, doesn't beg, doesn't bend, just exists, quietly, honestly, fully. I found that voice in solitude, in stillness, in the moments when I stopped trying to be heard and started trying to be real. She never asked for my truth, never leaned in to listen, and I no longer need her to, because this voice, the one I carry now, isn't for her, it's for me. It's the sound of healing, of becoming, of returning. The voice that didn't ask to be heard became the one finally listened to. I used to wait for it, the moment, the look, the words that said, I choose you. I thought love was a selection, spotlight, confirmation, that I was enough. And when she didn't choose me, questioned everything, my softness, my strength, my story, I tried to become more patient, more quiet, more worthy. But no matter how I shifted, her gaze never landed where I stood. And I broke, not because she didn't choose me, but because I could choose myself. Today, I didn't wait, didn't check for signs, didn't hope for a message, didn't shape my day around her absence. Chose me, chose peace over longing, truth over performance, presence over permission. It wasn't dramatic, wasn't loud, just steady. I walked through the world without needing to be seen, to feel real. I spoke without needing to be echoed. I loved without needing to be claimed. There's a kind of power in choosing yourself when no one else does. It's not defiance, it's freedom. She may never choose me, may never see what I carried, may never understand what I gave. But I do, and that is enough. The day I didn't need to be chosen was the day I finally became mine. I used to hold it out, my light, my joy, my softness, offered it like a gift to those who didn't ask for it. To her, especially to her. I wanted her to see it, to feel it, to reflect it back, so I'd know it was real. But she never did. Not fully, not deeply, not in the way I needed. And I dimmed, not because the light was gone, but because I thought it didn't matter if no one saw it. But light doesn't need an audience, needs a home. And slowly, I stopped offering it to those who couldn't hold it. I let it warm me, let it guide me, let it exist, without needing to be shared. I laughed, without needing someone to join, danced, without needing someone to watch, created, without needing someone to validate. And the light grew, not because she returned, not because someone finally noticed, but because I did. There's a kind of radiance that doesn't ask for reflection, simply shines. Carry that now, not as proof, not as performance, but as presence. She may never see it, may never understand it, may never feel what I tried to give, but I do, and that is enough. The light I didn't need to share became the warmth that finally held me. It began as absence, a quiet I didn't choose, a hush that felt like punishment for loving too loudly. Her leaving didn't echo, settled, like dust, like fog, like a silence that didn't ask questions, only left them behind. I sat in it, not knowing what to say, not knowing who I was, without her reflection, and for a while, I mistook that silence for emptiness, for failure, for proof that I wasn't worth staying for. But silence isn't the end. It's the beginning. Hold space, listens, waits for truth to find its shape. And slowly, mine did. I spoke, not to her, not for her, but from me. I said things I never thought I could. I am enough. I am whole. I am still here. The silence didn't resist. It welcomed. It became a voice. Not loud, not perfect, but mine. I no longer fear the quiet. I honor it, because in its stillness, I found the sound of my own becoming. Left, and the silence she gave became the voice I carry, not as a wound, as a witness, to the love I gave, to the truth I found, to the self I reclaimed. This is the end of her chapter, but not the end of mine, because the silence that became a voice is the one I'll never lose again.